artists and animators, and welcome to a Toon Boom interview. In the Land of the Flabby Schnook is a 2D animated stereoscopic VR film about confronting fears through understanding and empathy. The film won the prize for Best VR Animation at the Cinequest Film and Creativity Festival in 2021, and we invited the crew at Couleur TV to discuss the production process that went into animating for VR. So welcome to the stream, Francis and Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To start, can you introduce yourselves and describe your roles at Couleur TV?
I'm Francis Gélinas. I'm the founder of the studio and the head of artistic direction, you could say.
Yeah. I'm Martin Jean. I started working as a motion designer, but since then I've been wearing a lot of hats. Technical director, many things. Yeah, basically we switch hats all the time. So we're a small team, we love each other, so we allow each other to wear different hats.
So for viewers who may not have seen In the Land of the Flabby Schnook, how would you describe the film and the techniques used to make it?
So In the Land of the Flabby Schnook is a film for young audiences, maybe 5 to 7 years old, but I consider myself in that target range personally. It's a film that's been animated in 2D, but rendered in for virtual reality helmets. So it's a stereoscopical film. And it's a story about a little brother who asks his big sister how she learned to stop being afraid of the dark, actually. So she uses that as an excuse to bring her little brother through an imaginary adventure in the wardrobe, in which they will see many things, discover kind of a fantastical universe, and the little boy will learn that his fears are coming from him. Actually, basically, that's a summary. Should we show the trailer right now?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Okay. So here it is. Oh, sorry.
Those creature designs are great. All right. So what we saw is a 2D animated film made for VR. So I really wanted to ask you, what were your experiences with VR and 360-degree film like before working on this film?
None at all. So basically that was our initiation to this kind of technique. We worked with many different things before. We used the VR headsets for previs, for video mapping shows that we did. So we knew about the technology, but we never translated a 2D feature, a 2D film into
a stereoscopical 360 degrees film.
Exactly. So we never did that or anything of that sort, basically.
Our guess was that the film would have a bit more exposure released in that medium because it's a smaller pond, and I guess that we were right. It was the film toured the world actually in festivals. You mentioned the prize it won, but it won several actually. So we're really lucky. It was a nice move. We learned the hard way though. I remember really crying alone in my office at 9 with 10 computers doing rendering, and me running through each to restart the renders that had crashed. Anyways, but it was worth it because a thing with 360 degrees film, and I guess it's related to our lack of experience too. every step, because we used a lot of softwares obviously to get to that. So we started with Toon Boom Harmony, After Effects, and Autodesk Maya, and back to After Effects. So we had to render every step in huge resolutions in order to make sure that depending of the distance of the 3D camera, we would never have pixelation. So what we used Harmony to output like 12,000 pixels wide shots. In the scene where they walk in the swamp, they kind of travel for a long time, and the camera follows them in the 3D scene. But actually, it was a huge render that was
wow.
super wide. Yep. One thing that was a bit complicated too for the whole team and for the rendering while I'm there was that we figured, okay, I had read somewhere that 60 frames per second was the frame rate where we would lose motion sickness in a VR helmet. So we decided to do the film in 60 frames per second, even if by then none of the helmets were able to
play it. Yeah.
To play it. So, but it turned out to be a complication because all the animators too, they had their reflexes, their timings they're used to working in 24 frames per second actually. Yeah. So it was creating a little bit of complication and making the render time double. Yeah. So fun little things we learned along the way.
Yeah, the 60 frame per second was basically not necessary at that point, and it just really did, explode the render time and everything. So everything took twice as much time as it could have. So, yeah.
Actually, it was a good thing for planetariums, for dome, and because for domes they usually play in 60 frames per second. So we were fortunate we took that decision early on.
Yeah, because then the dome adaptation would have been complicated. We would have to redo a lot of things, which we didn't have to.
Because when you play stuff on a huge screen, like in a planetarium, I don't remember like what the length of the screen is. We would have to use like high school calculations that I completely forgot about to calculate the radius and stuff. But the bigger the image, the more you see the steps between the frames. So that's why 60 frames per second is mandatory actually.
Yeah. Well, one thing that brings up for me is like when you're animating for a screen, you have a lot of control over what the output will look like, right? Because the viewer is always going to be looking at their display. When you're animating for a 360-degree VR film, the viewer can look anywhere. So that introduces a lot of complication. You have to render everything that the person is looking at and also everything that they're not looking at.
Yes.
You need to cheat in a lot of ways, like hide the character behind something, or make it come out of an environment element, or definitely you have to think about these things for sure.
Yeah, but what I was about to say is kind of the opposite. You can't cheat because when you're doing you can't cheat because we want to have a slow pace editing. Right. So the scenes there is not a lot of angles. We wanted the viewer to never have motion sickness and to be able to really take his time looking around. So because we didn't have any cuts, in a standard production, the character crosses the screen, you cut to a new scene, you can rearrange the elements in the shot to serve your purpose. Maybe he's closer or further away from the door, I don't know, depending on what you need to do. And we'd never noticed that. But in that case, because it's like a long shot and you can look around, you can't just get out of screen, then everything has to be animated all the time. So it kind of seems obvious, but it's something I learned along the way. Like, I can't just I don't know, snap the character out of its position and put it somewhere else.
Yeah, to actually get there to that next action.
Yeah. So, and because I never wanted the audience to see that the elements were flat, so looking at the lack of thickness of the elements, I made sure that everything stayed facing the camera. So it meant if a character walks for a long time, maybe we have to bend the plane on which the character is walking.
And the whole environment has to unfold, the trees have to turn and to always be oriented towards camera, and to tilt if the camera moves up. And so all these things have to be thought about.
Yeah.
Love that.
The other thing that you made me think of with your question was A thing that changes a lot between standard screen and VR is obviously the timing of stuff. We're really used to see a fast editing on a standard screen, and we know that the audience will be looking at the screen. Of course, we can orient their eyesight in the frame, of course, but we basically know they'll be looking at the screen and they probably can see the whole screen at once. Where in VR, we notice that every time you switch to a different place, you have to let the audience sink in and be able to look around. Okay, I know where I'm at, now I can focus on the animation. So if the action happens at the really beginning of the scene, most of people will have missed it because they were just like acknowledging where they were.
Yeah, and also one thing this makes me think about is, for example, if you have an action taking place east, and then you gradually take people's attention towards the north, then the next action has to be starting north, because otherwise they're looking for the characters between scenes. I mean, if you have a cut for another scene, if you start with the characters over there, people don't see them, so they're looking around for them. So things like that, yeah, of course, when you start working with it, it seems obvious, but at first it wasn't. So we needed to discover all those things.
Yeah.
Right. So when you make a cut, the audience is in a new place, essentially.
You have to bring their
and they have
attention.
to. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but the audience is in a new place, but their head is still looking this way. So we have to make sure the new action starts this way, so they're not lost. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like trying to avoid a jump cut, right?
Pardon me?
It's almost like when you're working in like traditional animation and you're trying to avoid a jump cut between scenes, except instead of it being like a character in one part of a screen, it's like character in one part of the world.
Yeah.
Or orientation, or I don't know, stage maybe. Like it's almost like a play in terms of staging.
It's true. I mean, for this film, every scene, as I was saying, is a sequence shot. So there are, I think, 5 scenes total, and we fade out, fade in. So it's really smooth. We didn't have issues dealing with jump cuts and stuff like that. But the same applies when you cut your whole surrounding. Like we would have to change the value of the characters significantly to avoid jump cut feeling.
Yeah, jump cut feelings, yeah.
Because since this film, we've now done close to a dozen of films.
Yeah, a dozen adaptations, more or less. And we've accelerated the editing pace. We tried different cinematic cuts and many things that we weren't really feeling safe enough to do initially. So now we changed the editing style, and it's a bit faster and a bit more. Yeah, the things we didn't know that we could do that would be acceptable. But since this kind of cinematic language is already acquired, I mean, we watch films all the time. We're used to seeing this kind of language. At first, we were a bit hesitating, but now we kind of know what works and what works a little bit less. So yeah, we evolved with the editing style since then.
Yeah.
What made you really want to embrace? Sorry, I was just curious. What made you really want to embrace 3D VR film?
Okay, this is the moment where we should state our company's mission, but I've never translated it in English first before. Okay, our mission is to create strong narratives, but exploring new perspectives
and new mediums and new
with a touch of creativity. I don't know, it sounds better in French, but
yeah.
so that's what we do. I mean, we both started working in immersive shows and in immersive video mapping stuff. So we kind of learned playing with content in different mediums and different deployments. And I think it's really interesting. What I think is nice about immersive storytelling is that it creates a discomfort for the audience where, I don't know, their expectations are higher or attention level is higher. Because you don't feel safe, you're more aware of everything that's happening. I think it's interesting, and it also includes the audience in the actual experience.
People expect an experience and they're already super attentive. They're looking, they feel like they're going to be surprised. They want to be surprised. So you need to play with all these. It's basically you need to get tricks out of the bag all the time. And the main thing for us is that we want to have a strong story, strong narrative, and not just, it's not just a beauty show with sparkles and particles and stuff like that. It has to be telling a good story, but being aware of that kind of environment also where people expect to be surprised and all these things. So.
Yeah, when we were talking before the live stream, you were mentioning how because this film both plays in VR and also in like 360 domes and theaters, that the experience is very different between those two settings. Would you care to talk a little bit about how the experience is different?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, earlier what we were saying is that since the screen is literally in your eyes when you're in a VR headset,
you don't see it.
You don't see it, and you can have like a character coming really close to you. Whereas in a dome, if that happens, then the character becomes gigantic, and so there are certain things like pulling up, for example, like we were saying, if the camera moves back and up, then you start to see that there's nothing in the lower part of the.
Because in a dome, of course, it's only the upper half of the sphere,
180.
So you can't see the ground.
Exactly.
So if the camera lifts up, either you kind of switch the perspective of the whole universe, like bending it. Yeah. But we didn't do that for this one, so we changed the camera movement actually for this specific shot. But the main thing is that when you see the screen, you can perceive the distance with the image, and characters that are close to you in VR appear gigantic in a dome. So it really changes the point of view, actually.
And also maybe the reaction time, if you're following an action in a dome, I mean, the character might fly through, I don't know, 120 feet. So it's harder to follow than in a headset, since you just have to move just your head just a little bit instead of going the whole way around. So all these feelings are way different from in one medium compared to the other. So yeah.
The interesting thing about a dome is that you can actually watch it with a few people. So we have to say that it's something that VR still lacks, actually, is being able to watch stuff together. I have, we have a few different helmets at the office, but when I'm home with my family and kids, I'm not playing with the helmet alone in my corner, so someday I guess we'll be able to share these experiences, I guess in the near future, but for now, it's still something we do alone.
So some kind of a metaverse presentation could work, I guess, and then having many headsets, but yeah, still, it's not the same.
Yeah, I just think that's interesting too. Just how the medium really can have an influence on an audience's experience of the film. I was curious, Francis, because like in the Land of the Flabby Schnook is a children's story. It's a children's story that involves a lot of very interesting creature designs. I wanted to ask you about what was the approach to designing the creatures for the film, and how do those designs play into the film's story and themes?
It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. Okay, first, I gave a name to this style. I call it Spooky Cute. So all the monsters are cute, I think, but there's a spooky feeling to the scenes, and it seems a bit naive, like said like that. But my intention came from a deeper reflection, where I think in most of the children's books or children's stories, especially old like Disney films, for instance, there are super villains and good people. It kind of creates a dichotomy. I think a binary vision of the world where you have good and bad. I think it's a super bad thing for kids, because we always identify as the good people. So it kind of creates the separation between us and the others that do not have the same intentions as us. So I think it's a super important thing to show a nuanced world. What I think Miyazaki has done greatly in his films is, if you think about it, there are no villains. Sometimes the intentions of the characters won't align, and it creates conflict, which is interesting for a story, of course. But they have all their backstory.
They're going through a crisis and they're acting in a bad way now, but they're not perceived as bad inherently, basically. So
yeah, I think it's important to bring that nuance to young audience as early on as we can. So the film was a bit based like that. Most of the situations happening might be frightening at first, but then I don't know, the young kids will, because in the trailer we just showed at some point there are kind of bushes that stand up and start running around the protagonists, and the little boy screams and they all stop. They kind of are more afraid of him than he is of them, and it kind of stops that scene. Another one is the big monster where the camera lifts up. They end up entering a hole in its head to go to the next scene. So yeah, so the intention was exactly that. I mean, there's more to it than what you see at first glance, or sometimes it's worth it too.
so they have to be spooky in a way, but then they get revealed as, not so dangerous after all. And like the final scene, for example, is a great example of that. I mean, if you want to blow the punch,
I guess you can go ahead.
So basically, what happens in the end is the face of the monster keeps on changing, and it's like a
white square,
a sheet of paper basically with a drawing on it. And then the sister says, "Hey,
do something.
It's your monster." And then the kid goes, "Hey, wait a minute, that's the drawing I did yesterday," and then takes it off the monster, and then basically that's the resolution. So initially he finds it super spooky, but then so this character transformation was really important, basically, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and we've worked with on TV shows where the broadcaster is like, "Oh, we can't do scary stuff for children," and it's something I disagree with.
No skulls and no swords and no.
You can't draw a character with like angry eyebrows.
Yeah,
because children shouldn't be angry.
You'd be amazed what they made us change, especially eyebrows for a cute, friendly ghost. Anyways,
Yeah.
But I think being scared is natural and not a bad thing in itself, as long as you accept it. And you evolve through it.
Yeah. I think spooky cute is kind of an interesting aesthetic, right? You see it a lot in Halloween. I mean, there's some Halloween houses that are sort of decorated in a very realistic, very grisly sort of way. But usually it's like smiling witches and ghosts who we know are supposed to be scary, but like they're just kind of cute.
Yeah, but it's like basically helping people to transcend their fears and to take on bigger challenges. And, you could extrapolate that at the philosophy behind it, but basically that's where we started out. We wanted to make people go through this journey with their kids.
Yeah, and in VR, especially for young kids, it was important to not be too scary. So you see a monster, he looks cute, but he's way bigger than you. So kind of shifts the perspective. We have to be a bit more... we have to give clues that nothing bad will happen, actually. So that was the thinking behind it.
And the big sister.
I like the idea that you have to like scare children, but not too much.
Yeah. And then the big sister is really good at this. She's reassuring her brother all the time, and so that also is accompanying the kid through the experience, which is great. Yeah.
So this was like a really ambitious experimental project. How would you say that it compared to other projects that you worked on in the past?
We repeated the experience several times since, like as we said. It's the same kind of workflow going through Toon Boom, After Effects Maya, back to After Effects for compositing. And so basically we repeated the experience, and there's more coming. I mean, we're still working at this.
Another way to answer the question would be, when we have a client asking us for specific stuff, I mean, we have to take like many factors into account, many roles, people involved. The cost explodes quite fast. So what I mean to say by that is that with a small amount of money, well, not that small, but smaller than usual, we were able to, I guess, to push the visuals a bit further. because we were our own clients. So in the end, we didn't have to deal with corrections and fixes and arguing about the style. So we could focus on the technique and make efficient choices.
Because you're used to dealing with clients, you know how to be good clients for yourselves.
Yeah, well.
Well, there's less, I don't know, there's less different, there's just one view, basically. So
yeah, but to be completely honest, I would have dropped that project. Like, yeah, but we had so many people involved already. I felt we owed them something. So we had to finish it, but at times it was like, oh my God, it's so much more work than we had anticipated. Yeah, so when I say small budget, we weren't counting hours ourselves, so it helped.
And like I said, we repeated the experience since then, but we learned so much through that first movie that now we know what to avoid and, you know, where we can be more efficient and what. So yeah, it's a constant learning curve, of course.
So let's drill into specifics. I wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges that you encounter when designing a 360 film using 2D animation specifically, and how do you approach those kinds of challenges? Because like 2D animation, right, you usually think of it as something that's fairly flat, right? And if you're bringing it into a context where the viewer can look anywhere, how does that impact what you need to do?
So, of course, it kind of becomes a mise en scène. Is there another way to say that? I don't think.
We also use the word mise en scène, yes.
So the mise en scène is really different because you have to put things in the 3D world. So
many planes.
Yeah, so we were thinking about that. We kind of gave us the challenge to not do the same mise en scène principle every time. So in the first scene, they both are talking in their bedroom, so it's a really simple setup. But the second scene, they walk into that forest at night. So this is a basic setup. We wanted to have multi-planes as we do in 2D, but to be able to feel the depth, they had to be really far apart from one another in the 3D environment.
And as the camera moves, then you get the parallax and
well, the camera doesn't move in that scene, but you see the depth because you have this, two eyes are different renders. But so we set up the first cylinder. Okay, that's the approximate distance we want from the camera. Then we set up the second one, but since we had drawn on a 2D paper with, we drew the mountains further away, smaller. So then it meant we had to scale this in 3D. So it's a bit weird if we looked at that scene. The first cylinder is really small, but as you go from plane to plane, from depth plane to depth plane, the cylinders are so big, like hundreds of thousands of Maya units. So you can't even see all the cylinders at once in the working view. Fortunately, it works in the render, and so we scale the cylinders by putting their anchor point on the camera to make sure that the view wouldn't change, but the depth changes. So that was one discovery. In the second scene, I wanted to feel the depth, but not in planes, but having every tree separately. So it's dead trees. I could put the segment on, but it's dead trees. So we put every tree like in the around the characters. But as Martin was saying early on, we discovered, of course, that if the camera travels following the characters, the trees will look flat. So okay, we have to code a little script that will make sure the trees always stay aligned with the camera and they don't flip when the camera passes them. And we discovered that we had to unfold some planes in the background to make sure they were always facing the camera. As the camera travels, for instance, the plane is rotated like that. As it goes in front of it, it unfolds.
Yeah.
That we don't notice it at all. But so there is almost no flat elements in the 3D scene. We bent everything to always
surround the camera, basically, in concentric circles at different depths, at different Z depths. And then, like Francis says, as you move, everything needs to be reoriented, or you need to find some tricks basically to make the illusion complete and to make it work. And since you want to take the watcher into a new environment every time, so you need to reinvent these methods and these cheats, if you will, every time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think we did to give us more freedom in the 3D world, where we didn't know yet where the camera would be all the time in relation to what was on camera. Actually, we rendered everything out of Toon Boom Harmony at super high resolutions. Fortunately, it worked like a charm, but tens of thousands of pixels to make sure we could zoom in enough without ever being pixelated.
Pixels, yeah.
So that was something.
Did you export them as like PNGs? Like, I'm just trying to imagine how much storage you would have needed too for this film.
Oh, I could do. I can check on the computer right now, but it'll take a few minutes calculating. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but like Francis said earlier, also when we were talking, I mean, there's 10 computers rendering full time, and then they all crash one after another, and so you need to go and delete that frame and then start the render over again, and that's just the name of the game when you're rendering such huge things. I mean, even with the most powerful machine, it'll happen. So you need to be on top of it all the time if you want it to be over one day, basically.
Because we don't have a proper render farm to do that specific type of project.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, because this is a project that is very different than a lot of 2D animated projects that you'd see, because it does play out in 360 stereoscopic film. And I think it's interesting to think about all of the logistical things that you need to address that are different than a typical production.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. We discovered a lot of that stuff along the way as we went through the process. There was a lot of back and forth, and that complicates things when you have to go through 4 softwares before you can see an actual image. Because of course, from Toon Boom Harmony, we exported flat frames, so we couldn't see them in the spatialized environment. So we always had to go to Maya, and then we could see 3D stuff. But it's painful when you can't just rely on one software. Like when you do the compositing and the animation in Toon Boom Harmony, everything is simple. You just go fix your stuff and re-render. Yeah. But in this case, it's re-rendering, re-importing, re-rendering, re-importing all the time.
3 layers deep, yeah.
Yeah. And then with particles and then whatever you want to add in the end, then you realize maybe they go through drawings and stuff like, and so you need to rethink the whole structure and make things bigger so that the particle won't interpenetrate, or there's so many layers that you find as you go, and that forces you to go backwards and to rethink the pipeline over and over again. So yeah, and for a year, I'd say we were able to do tweaks. We didn't have to, once we said the film was finished, we were satisfied with it. But I mean, from time to time, we had to go in the project and export specific frames for, I don't know, that festival, which wanted to do a poster or stuff like that. But because these tools for 3D creation are kind of still developing, now new versions are coming up, basically.
Now we couldn't play in the project anymore in the final project, because particles don't work anymore. It's not the same versions of the plugin, and updating that would be days of work.
Or we'd have to retro install everything, which is not always possible. And so,
we used a specific plugin to inject the spatialized sound, because the sound is mixed in a way where if you look there, you'll hear this monster louder than the one behind you, for instance.
So
these plugins don't exist anymore. So that's another thing we discovered. Last year we worked on another film. Most of the stuff we had used for the 3D tools or the stereoscopical tools we had used for the first one weren't available anymore.
Or the 360 sound design, as you were saying.
You'd almost want to air gap your production tools so that they don't update.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess
really
this will become easier within the next years, obviously.
Yeah,
but it's still a bit painful.
Yeah. Yeah, we started when the tools were not standardized, basically. So, still evolving a lot.
Yeah. So when did you start production on this film?
Oh, when did the pandemic start?
Oh, that was like 15 years, right? No,
Yeah,
wait, what was
something
it?
like
1
that.
year?
No, I guess the film was released in was it
So
2020?
2020, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
So you
we
started
had
2019?
started 2 years before.
So at least 2018, at least.
So yeah, we started. Well, it took 2 years, but not of consecutive, days. The movies we started the movie, worked on it for a few months. Principal, mainly on the 2D animation. Then we had no more money for X reasons, so we stopped, and then we started back a year later, and then we finished it. So, if we put everything together, I guess it would be 9 months or something like that. And a lot of these months were used for rendering.
Yeah, render, yeah, basically.
I mean, if we take all the renderings from all the different steps and put them together,
A render farm would have been great.
I wanted to ask if you had advice for other artists who might be interested in animating for VR or 360 film, specifically with 2D animation.
patience. Yeah. 2D animators. I mean, I think the tools will become more and more available. Now you can output some VR content directly from After Effects. It's a bit limited, but that makes things easier. You can think of a way where, okay, I'm gonna set this thing so that it comes out nice, and yeah, but patience. It's a joke, but it's also true. I mean, just think that everything will take a lot more time than what you're used to. Yeah.
And even besides that, I mean, even the way you're animating, everything has to be slower, greater. I mean, you can't. You always see the whole character. So there's many things like that you need to think. Just by, as we said, you can't hide anything really. So the characters are always full foot. Thank you.
Full shot.
Full shot. Yeah. So there's many things like that everything takes more time, basically. Even like as you were saying earlier, if you want to have the character go from there to the door, it has to walk the whole way to the door. And so, yeah, just.
Yeah, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm convinced that we are heading towards more and more VR helmets. To be honest, I don't really use my helmet a lot other than to watch the content we create. But there's no doubt in my mind that the viewing experience is richer and more immersive than standard screen. So to me, it's obvious that it'll become more and more available and more present. Who knows to what extent, but I don't think it's something that's going to die.
No, it's not going away. It's not going away, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What excites you about VR? Like, what gets you like really interested in making more VR films?
Putting the viewer in a different perspective. I think it's really interesting. I like going to theater. In theater, you see a play. Well, let's not go there. But in theater, you see the play in front of you most of the time. But there's also immersive theater, like the experience in New York called Sleep No More, where you walk in that huge mansion decorated in the 1920s old psychiatric hospital style, really spooky, and the play is happening everywhere in that place. It puts you in a different mindset. You enter that place and you're scared. So you watch a thing happening from that point of view. It really, I don't know. It's more powerful, I think.
It increases the emotional response, basically. That's for sure. So if you want to play on scary emotions, on something to feel majestic, you have a sunrise and it surrounds you, basically. And so these things are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
For the narrative experience.
But more to your point earlier, like when a character gets closer to you, it doesn't just get bigger; it feels like it gets closer.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. But the scale is something really that we have a really different relation to in an immersive environment, because you could see a wide shot where we have hundreds of people in the screen. No, it's a bad example. Well, you watch King Kong on your screen. Of course, you understand that King Kong is big compared to the tiny house he's stepping on. But in the helmet, you'll be right beside the house, so you'll see
Right.
that King Kong is really big. It changes
You have to crane your head up. You have to.
yeah. You'll see some parts of King Kong you might not have seen.
On the
Oh,
screen.
at that angle, sure.
Right.
Also if you want to tell a story, basically it's another tool. It's a super powerful narrative tool. So yeah, that's one thing for sure.
Yeah, but I think there's something interesting. In French, there's a saying, taking the carpet out of,
Pulling the carpet from under the feet.
yeah, meaning like you lose your balance. So you're not comfortable anymore. You're in a state of awareness, of
Well,
receptivity.
I guess movies on screen used to do that to people, but nowadays we're so used to it. So
It's true.
yeah,
Like the first time
When you see the train on the projector and everybody in the
Exactly.
audience is screaming and running out.
yeah.
Exactly. So I guess this they must have felt that the movie screen was a window or something, and yeah. But
I think that might be apocryphal, but it's an interesting story for sure.
Yeah. So new ways to tell stories. I mean, it's super exciting. It doesn't mean I don't want to do a film for cinemas, or I still do. I still personally I love creating for all these types of mediums. I think they're just new ways to express yourself. So we've done standard, we've done VR, and we've done dome for planetariums, but we have other projects. I wouldn't be ready to discuss now, but just thinking about new ways to tell stories. Yeah.
So just to tell you, the folder is now at 4.7 terabytes, and it's not finished yet. Still going.
That is wild.
For 6 minutes.
That is
6 minutes.
Yes. So you can multiply that out to a feature film by multiplying that by what, 60.
Yeah, it would be a big drive. But you know what's so cool? So we created the film. I created first in French. My girlfriend was doing one of the voices, and my son doing the smaller brother. And he was really cute. He was not acting. He was really saying the stuff as he was saying it. And sometimes I would say, okay, we're not going to go to bed because it's late. And he was sad, so I would make him repeat his line right then so that he had the right tone. Anyways,
he was torturing his kid, basically.
It was a fun process, but then it got translated to English. Obviously, we did that early on because we knew it would be shown more in English. But recently, it's been translated in Chinese, and there are discussions to translate it in a few other languages. So we're super excited about it. Yep. We have the plan to actually print all the posters in different languages.
Yep.
That's really cool.
In Chinese again.
Oh.
No, but yeah, it doesn't translate the same, anyways.
Yeah, no, I don't remember.
Yeah, but it was super exciting. Anyways.
I also wanted to ask, did this experience change the way that you work with the studio more broadly on other productions?
Interesting. Since we worked on that show, when we worked on that show, we had just worked on one TV show, animated TV show, where we were the service studio, where we did all the animations, but we weren't in charge of the art direction for that specific show. Since then, we've done 3.
Well, there was 2. There was this other one that was mixed media, basically. There were some portions with 2D, with Toon Boom, Harmony Toon Boom, but also with stop motion and film. And so there's many different mediums and a little bit of Toon Boom. But then we did this other one, this other project as a service studio that you talked about. But since then,
we've worked on different TV shows actually that were our ideas, our original ideas. So we could say in a way that it was the first step in that line of work. So I don't know if it allowed us to change our workflow because of what we learned there. I mean, we certainly learned stuff that we could apply to the next VR films we did. But No, I don't know if how it, yeah, I don't know how it influenced the rest of it because I mean,
But
it's
it
a
changed
6 minutes film and we did like hours of material like before and after. So
but it changed our vocation a little bit. Definitely,
yeah,
we're aiming in that direction a little bit more. Let's say because we fell in love with it. We knew we loved it, but it kind of we
You're
actually put the shoulder to the wheel.
yeah, well said. Better said than
All
less said.
right. So, with all this in mind, where can our audience find more of your work online?
Okay, so of course our URL is couleur.tv. So in French it means color.tv. So COULEUR.tv. But if you look for In the Land of the Flabby Schnook on the Oculus store, when you're in your helmet, you'll definitely find it. They bought a license for a few years, so you still have time. Yeah, basically that's the two places. I mean, our TV shows will be on specific broadcasters.
Yeah, you can find them on the broadcasters, but most of them are referenced on our website anyway. So.
Yeah.
All right. And is there anything else that you both want to plug?
Pardon me?
Is there anything else that you want to mention in terms of places people can find your stuff?
Well, we have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, exciting stuff, old people stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. We eat in the park. We're on the Myland, so we eat in the park sometimes. So if you want to,
grab a lunch.
I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, of course, if you're passing by Montreal and you want to chat, or you're an artist and you have an amazing idea you want to share with some
or a new project you want us to work on.
Of course, by all means, please call us.
All right. Well,
our
thank
new
you so
website
much.
will be online in a few weeks, actually. So
we'll
keep an eye out. Thank you, Francis and Martin, for joining us to discuss your work on 2D animation and VR film. And also thank you to our audience for tuning in to our live stream discussion. If you enjoyed the discussion and are interested in using Harmony for your next project, you can download a 21-day trial at toonboom.com. You can also find more production interviews on our blog at blog.toonboom.com, including interviews on animating dance scenes in Harmony. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.